Happy New Year, everyone. Gary Palmucci here from New Plaza Cinema. We had some technical difficulties with the beginning of the podcast last week, so I'm recording this do-over here on January 2nd, and we'll go right into Max Alvarez and my discussion of Breathless very shortly. I first saw Breathless back in the mid 70s and have probably revisited it every 5 or 10 years since. It's always inspired me as a very cleverly made from scratch film that kickstarted one of the cinema's great careers and one of the great stretches of creativity in cinema history, the French Nouvelle Vague. For many critics, it's also become one of cinema's milestones. Uh, my friend Jim Hoberman says there's the Battleship Potemkin, Citizen Kane, and Breathless. But even legends can morph over time or be challenged then and now. And perhaps tonight we'll hear a diversity of voices on this subject. So we're going to go right into the original trailer of the film, cut by Jean-Luc Godard himself. And Max and I will be back. Thanks very much.
La jolie fille, le vilain garçon, le revolver, le gentil monsieur, la méchante femme,
Scénario de François Truffaut.
la mort, la petite américaine, le voleur d'auto, le concerto pour clarinette, la police,
Supervision de Claude Chabrol.
la pin-up, le romancier, la boniche, Humphrey Bogart, Marseille, mon ami Gaby, Picasso, le photographe italien, les anarchistes, le magnétophone,
Un film de Jean-Luc Godard.
la tendresse, l'aventure, le mensonge, l'amour, les Champs-Élysées, la peur,
Avec Gene Seberg et Jean-Paul Belmondo.
le diable au corps, du rififi chez les hommes, et Dieu créa la femme, Scarface, à bout de souffle.
Le meilleur film actuel.
I think the young lady's voice on the soundtrack, Max, and sorry for not introducing you fully there before. Her voice will remain unidentified, but we know for sure that's Godard speaking the male speaking parts there in that trailer, as he did many times hence.
Absolutely. And it certainly captures the spirit of the film from the cinematic in-jokes, references to Rafifi and God Created Woman and Scarface and Bogart, to just being able to encapsulate in one single word what a character or a situation is supposed to represent in the image that he shares with us.
And we see four of the key five French Nouvelle Vague directors either spoken of or seen in the trailer. In addition to Godard, Francois Truffaut, Claude Chabrol, we have Jacques Rivette laying on the ground there as the man run over by the car. So that's 4 out of 5. Only Eric Romer somehow didn't get into the on the action of Breathless. But the Nouvelle Vague, this great resurgence of French filmmaking talent in the late 50s, as Godard described he and his friends as cavemen crashing into the Palace of Versailles during the reign of Louis XV. Perhaps not quite that dramatic, but we're still feeling its effects today. And they helped each other make these first films. Breathless apparently came about in large part at the Cannes Film Festival in 1959 when Truffaut and Godard persuaded producer Georges de Beauregard to back Godard's first film, and they would back him up if anything happened, apparently.
Yes, and it's funny because in the trailer, as well as the original posters for Breathless, it's a screenplay by Truffaut, supervised by Chabrol, which was simple mythology. Those two directors agreed to lend their names to the project in order to get the distribution and funding for Godard to make this first feature. So their names attached to the project gave it a certain urgency and commercialism. Otherwise, they did have no specific involvement. But this crashing Versailles analogy that you gave is not too much of an exaggeration, because when he was interviewed in the early 90s, Chabrol described the French film industry at the time they were starting to direct as impenetrable. And they had to do whatever it took to get directing work and to get projects made, including praising each other's films in Cahiers du Cinema and other magazines, and doing whatever they could to help the other get them made.
Well, there's another director who turns up in the film. We see him in the trailer. He's somewhat older, but I guess a spiritual godfather to these young men, Jean-Pierre Melville, whom we know as the director of The Breathless Samurai, which we showed earlier this year. And he's the pretentious author who Gene Seberg interviews on the deck of a building somewhere in Paris. There comes up with that immortal line that his desire is to become immortal and then to die.
Yes, he was technically not part of the Nouvelle Vague, but as you say, a great influence on them, and you can see there's so much influences that for a film like Abu Dussouf from some of the American films, which we can talk more about, but including Melville's films that he had been making, his crime-related films that he was going to be focusing more on as the 1960s unfolded.
Well, another legendary figure is the cinematographer of Breathless, Raoul Coutard, who shot 400 Blows, which we also saw and loved earlier this year, and many other early Nouvelle Vague pictures. Now, you have a unique perspective on this, as we were discussing this week. You've actually, talking about the beautiful in-the-street black and white look of Breathless, which we love so much. You've actually been out there with a 35 millimeter portable camera trying to shoot black and white film in Paris, and it ain't easy, I think, as you described to me.
Well, you've given me a promotion. I would kill to be able to shoot a film in Paris, but the next best city, I actually have been out on the streets of New York and also Washington, D.C. with a portable Arriflex shooting Kodak black and white stock. So I'm in awe of what Coutard was able to achieve in Breathless, because black and white stock, as beautiful as it is, requires a lot of artificial light to get an image. And Breathless was filmed. In fact, the only lighting that was used, the only artificial lighting that was probably used, was in that quick scene of the pinup girl posing for the camera, where you see lights. But other than that, Coutard did not use artificial lighting for even the interiors. And that's because he and Godard were able to use different kinds of film stocks for Breathless. The scene that I know we'll talk more about, that 24-minute scene in the hotel.
The heart and soul of the film.
The heart and soul of the film was filmed with artificial light. And they had a special film stock that enabled them to shoot without additional lighting. The magnificent scenes as the narrative is winding down, where they're driving at night through Paris towards Place de Concorde, that was shot with actually Ilford photographic stock that's designed for still photography, not for motion pictures. That's because that was able to get a much larger, what we call ASA rating, and those are results I would kill for filming at night in a major city. But that was part of some of the groundbreaking technical work that this film did.
Well, of course, it's Godard's direction and his amazing eye for composition, which we've seen for about 65 years now. The critic Dave Kerr once said that he felt the two directors who had the best compositional eyes in film were John Ford and Jean-Luc Godard. Now, you could not imagine a more diverse couple of fellows than that. But of course, it's the actors in the film who really carry it to its iconic level as well. Jean Seberg gets star billing in the movie, and she had a kind of tortured couple of years with Otto Preminger that led up to the making of Breathless.
Absolutely. Jean Seberg was born in Iowa, and she was 17 when Preminger selected her from thousands and thousands of auditioning young actresses for Saint Joan, which was made in 1957. And then she followed that up with Bonjour Tristesse the following year. Both films were failures. Both films, her performances were brutally attacked by the international press, totally unfairly. But Godard had the good sense to see that there was something quite remarkable in this young actress who was only around 20, 19 or 20 when she made Breathless. And he saw the potential for her to be in this film. And we have to keep in mind the pressures the actors were under, because this was not a typical production where you're given a completed script at the start of production. Godard was literally writing the film on either the eve of scenes being photographed or on the day of. So the actors didn't really know what to expect. The film was shot silently, and later the dialogue was dubbed in, but Godard fed them their lines before they spoke them. Now he wasn't able to do that after this, because then he was using direct sound on his films. So the actors had to learn their immediate lines within a very short time of filming.
I mean, the film was shot in 23 days. Now, some independent filmmakers today would say that's kind of a leisurely shooting schedule. And apparently there were days when they only worked for a couple of hours, and Godard, ran out of inspiration or whatever, and he struck the set. And then other times they shot for 12 or more hours a day. But it's still kind of remarkable on any level.
And that's something that always got him into trouble with his producers, because they couldn't understand you only worked 12 minutes today and then 12 hours the next day, and everybody gets paid the same regardless. But the French regulations were a lot more lenient for filmmaking. They were able to use a very, very small crew for Breathless, which they wouldn't have been able to do here in the United States. And so that's how, that's the only way Godard would have been able to work.
Now, Jean-Paul Belmondo, at this point, he hadn't had any major starring roles. Like, he had been in some short films. He was in at least one early Claude Chabrol film, not one of his better ones, but this was really a breakout for him. And I guess he had been a boxer for some period of time. We see him doing a little shadow boxing at a couple of moments in the film.
Yeah, he was the son of a sculptor, and he studied drama at the Paris Conservatory, and he was performing in the provinces on stage before finding work as an actor on the Paris stage. But he did have a very short and successful boxing career, winning 3 matches between 1959 and 1960, and apparently decided to wisely change occupations once he noticed the changes that were going on in his physical appearance.
Wow. Possibly in and around making this film, or even after shooting was over.
Because he had already made 9 films before Breathless, including, as you say, the Chabrol film, which was known also as Leda, Web of Passion.
Oh, yes.
This was his breakout role, and his agent thought that it was going to ruin his career. And also, Jean Seberg was very, very concerned about the film because of Godard's unorthodox working methods.
Well, not every American critic fell in love with Breathless when it was first released in the U.S. The infamous Bosley Crowther in the New York Times, his review ran under the headline, "Sordid View of French Life." And according to our friend Dennis Lim over at the Film Society of Lincoln Center, an article he wrote some years ago, Crowther complained about the film's, quote, "pile-up of gross indecencies," unquote, and credited it as a window into, quote, "the savage ways and moods of some of the rootless young people of Europe and America today." And even Pauline Kael, who became a big proponent of Godard in his late films in the later 60s, her review was a little bit more sympathetic, but her description of the characters was likewise tinged with some disapproval and alarm. She writes, "You are left with the horrible suspicion that this is a new race, bred in chaos, accepting chaos as natural, and not caring one way or another about it or anything else."
That about sums it up. I mean, the New York Times, of course, is going to reform once Vincent Canby becomes the major critic. Nothing Godard can do will get a negative review from Canby. Even Godard is most unwatchable in the late 60s and beyond. Canby was always defending. So
That's true. And ironically, because the film had a tremendous impact on American filmmakers in the 1960s as well, particularly a film like Bonnie and Clyde, where I'm visualizing now Warren Beatty with the hat pulled down over his head like Belmondo, and doing with a matchstick what Belmondo was doing much more acrobatically with a cigarette throughout much of Breathless. And ironically, Bonnie and Clyde was the film that cost the curmudgeonly Bosley Crowther at the New York Times his job after he panned it in 1967.
well, Breathless holds up a lot better than Bonnie and Clyde. But Bonnie and Clyde also references a shot in Breathless where Belmondo was wearing dark glasses, and one of the lenses is gone, and you see his eye through the other lens. As Warren Beatty is being shot at the end of Bonnie and Clyde, he also has a pair of sunglasses missing one of the lenses. And Jack Nicholson in Chinatown in 1974, also after a fight scene, is wearing a pair of glasses that are missing a lens. So clearly these were references to Breathless, and Breathless was referencing other films that came before it, such as Robert Aldrich's Kiss Me Deadly from 4 or 5 years earlier. And
The ultimate nihilistic noir.
very nihilistic, and also Andre de Toth's the film from 1954, Crime Wave, which, because they both featured a lot of location photography, filming in real cars, which Breathless did. And also a very important American independent film by John Cassavetes, Shadows, filmed on the streets of New York, handheld 16 millimeter camera. The look of that film clearly inspired Godard and other new wave people, I believe.
That's another film we should show, just to show, the side by side what was going on, on the other side of the ocean, right around that time.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
The Hotel de Suede, I think, is the name of the hotel, which that 20-minute or so scene takes place between Belmondo and Gene Seberg. Now, there's some terrific extra material in the Criterion DVD of Breathless, which I know you have right there.
Right here.
Reminding me once again that my copy has not been seen for several years since I lent it to my son, but that's not unusual. But they have a terrific documentary in there about that hotel. I think it was subsequently torn down. Godard had lived in it for some period of time in the 50s, and again, they shot in that room, all natural light, and that's and we see kind of the distillation of their relationship, and I think we're kind of dancing around just the genuineness and the depth of their relationship, and it really comes out in that scene, and we see Gene Seberg sort of saying at first she's pregnant, and then seeming to backpedal away from that, and we see Belmondo's alternate sincerity, insincerity. There's obviously intimacy between the couple that's real, although we just kind of get an intimation of that, but it's kind of all there in that.
Another thing you see in this scene and throughout Breathless, there's a lot of jumping around, which today we see all the time in commercial films and on hip streaming series, where I'm here, and suddenly I'm here, and then I'm over here. But in 1960, for a film to do that so jarringly, it was considered amateurish. But this was a technique that the editor, Cécile Dessougy, who was so important as an editor among the Nouvelle Vague. I mean, she cut films by Godard and Eric Romer and Truffaut. She claimed this was a lot of Godard's work, but the film was too long, and he had to cut a great portion out of it. And he did that by removing chunks from each scene, not caring about what the continuity was like. He hated continuity, and this was evident particularly in that hotel sequence.
Well, another one of those terrific extras on the Criterion disc, a gentleman who was another legendary character in the French film industry. His name is Pierre Rission. He was actually an assistant director on Breathless. He was a publicist, a press agent, kind of a man who saw it all in that period of time, and was also producer's rep, producer himself, always turned up at the Cannes Film Festival up until just 3 or 4 years ago when he passed away. He talks about the editing style and how it came about almost casually or accidentally. One of those incredible stories about a landmark trope which is still being employed today.
Yeah, and to continue the theme you were raising about we're trying to get a sense of this relationship, if I can give someone an unintellectual observation here, it's kind of a lost cause trying to look for consistency in character behavior in Godard films, because remember, they are being written as the film is being made. So there's a scene in the hotel room where he slaps her on the behind and then she slaps him in the face, and but they love each other. And you see that in Contempt as well. There's a lot of erratic behavior that I think comes from the fact that these things were often being written the day of or the night before, and it makes it a little more difficult for the actors to get a handle on where their roles are, how their relations are to each other. In that scene, we see Seberg giving some dialogue that Godard is later going to steal from himself in a way. She's looking at the mirror. This is after, presumably, they've slept together. And she says to Belmondo, do you prefer my eyes, my mouth, or my shoulders? And that's very reminiscent of 3 years later when Brigitte Bardot is going to be asking Michel Piccoli, about which of portions of her body does he prefer and does he love.
In Contempt.
In Contempt.
Which I think is another one of, as I said, it kickstarted. The first thing it kickstarted in Godard's career was what to me is an incredible run of like 15 feature films between Breathless and Weekend in 1968. Now, maybe not every one of them is great. I'm sure you would not say that.
I would say 13 films. I wouldn't count Weekend, but go ahead, Gary.
Well, okay. It's 15, so it's 14 minus Weekend. And Contempt, which we mentioned twice already, I would certainly recommend. My Life to Live, Band of Outsiders, Alphaville, Masculine Feminine, La Chinoise, all of them recommended if you were intrigued by Breathless. And Breathless is really actually a film that Godard kind of disowned for much of his career, or considered. What's that famous quote we've been debating the attribution of today?
Right. Well, so here's the thing. There's a famous quote that they've attributed to Godard. Gary, unless Gary, you've actually found the original source. I've never found the source.
No.
It's something along the lines of, whenever a great film is a commercial success, it's usually due to a misunderstanding. Now, I believe that was a misquote of something he gave in an interview in Godard on Godard in the early 60s. He said about Breathless that, he said, like the 400 blows, Abu Dussouf was a misunderstanding. Through a concatenation of circumstances, it became much too successful. Today, Abu Dussouf would do less well. That was his take. And he was very uncomfortable with the film's success because it was really only one of two films that, at least for 20 years, the next success he had in France was the film that we know as Slow Motion or Every Man for Himself.
Every Man for Himself.
These other films you mentioned were not successful. When he was in production on his second film, Le Petit Soldat, which was as you mentioned, got banned in France. He said, what was he said? That he hoped to disappoint his audience, that they don't trust me anymore. And he got his wish, because I think after the direction he was going in following Breathless, audiences became a little bit more cautious.
I remember seeing him in 1983. He came to the New York Film Festival to present a film called Passion, which was visually eloquent, but I think dramatically kind of muddled. And he gave a press conference, and someone asked him about the remake of Breathless with Richard Gere, which had come out that same year. And he said, well, Breathless, I have no rights to it anymore, and I am glad. There was a combination of laughter and shock in the press audience when they heard that. But
well, he's always known for a good, shocking, scandalous quote. And this documentary that, Gary, you cited on the making of Breathless, my favorite part is when the poor documentarian actually made 2 attempts to speak to Godard on the phone to ask him about the film. The first time, Godard's answer was, dream on. goodbye, and he hung up. The second time was try to clear up the finale, which I've mentioned before. We can, I think that's been debated almost as like the Zapruder film of the JFK assassination. What does it mean after we see the Belmondo character staggering down the Rue Compagne Première, collapsing at the crosswalk and looking up at Gene Seberg's character? You and I, Gary, have seen different translations of this.
At least three.
At least three.
Yes.
I swear there was one version where the English subtitles translating where it's c'est vraiment dégueulasse. He was almost calling her a bitch as he lied there. Well, then there was that other version you saw, Gary.
Well, I think that the most current one, the Criterion DVD, which is the current edition, and also the film is on HBO Max right now. I watched it the other night, and they still use that translation where dégueulasse is translated as "you make me want to puke," or "it makes me want to puke." Her betrayal of him at the end. We have heard in the previous distributor to Criterion, it was translated as "you're a scumbag," or where it's
exactly. And you see the subtitles as Gene Seberg's character is saying, what does it mean, scumbag? But apparently a more accurate translation is where he says, as he's lying there, "It's really disgusting." And she says to one of the policemen, "What did he say?" And the detective says, "He said you are really disgusting." And then she says, "What is, dégueulasse?" And the documentary filmmaker asked Godard in 1993, "So which is the right quote?" And Godard said, "I don't remember. I'm working on something. Goodbye."
Yeah, typical. Well, Godard turned 90 this month. He's apparently working on a new film. Maybe if there's a Cannes Film Festival next year, it will turn up as it often seems to do. And something we talked about earlier was that both Godard and Clint Eastwood share the same birth year, 1930. They're both still working. They both have new films in preparation. We can't imagine too much more diverse lives of filmmakers or entertainers than those two guys. And yet, several years ago in 2014, I was involved in the release of a 3D film that Godard made called Adieu à langage, or Goodbye to Language. And that was, at least in 2014 dollars, the most successful, highest grossing film that he had ever had in his American career. And that, although I'm sure Breathless sold more individual tickets back in the day for much cheaper prices. And then Clint Eastwood's American Sniper was the highest grossing film in his career. So in the same year, these two utterly diverse filmmakers had their biggest American hits, which is that's a mind boggler to me.
But there are links there, because when Godard made his film Detective in 1985, he dedicated it to Edgar Ulmer, the director, and Clint Eastwood.
Yes.
And Gene Seberg in 1969 is going to appear with Clint Eastwood in Paint Your Wagon. And I think it's worth talking a little bit about mentioning her because of her tragic life, very, very difficult life. She did have this Hollywood exposure at such a young age under a very autocratic director, Otto Preminger. She's considered washed up by the time she's 18. Then she has this comeback with Godard. She's going to make 31 more films after Breathless. There aren't many memorable ones, although she does appear in a wonderful film by Robert Rosen with Warren Beatty, Lilith.
Yes.
And also in Erwin Kersner's Sean Connery film, A Fine Madness. And then there was this, she was very progressive interviews. She was a supporter of the Black Panthers. The US press and the FBI were targeting her for harassment in the late 60s. And there was awful things written about her that led to all kinds of mental health issues, a miscarriage, and so on.
The excellent podcast series many of our listeners may be familiar with, called You Must Remember This by Karina Longworth, a Los Angeles film writer. She did a lengthy series on Gene Seberg and a parallel on Jane Fonda, to whom similar things were both happening throughout their career from about 1960 well into the 1970s. The parallel careers of those two actresses in great depth. and it's well worth listening to.
And both of them ended up being directed by Godard. Fonda was in Tout va bien in
That's right.
1972. And Godard, very uncharitably, with his filmmaking partner Gorin, made an anti-Jane Fonda piece called Letter to Jane, where he was
Jane,
ridiculing her support of the North Vietnamese during the Vietnam War. And Seberg, in one of her memoirs that I paged through that I thought was fascinating, she thought that Godard would never have done that if it was an actor, if it was a man. That she thought Godard's attack on Fonda was very sexist and was very unfair. I thought her perspective was quite compelling.
Well, that's also a Criterion DVD. That film Tout va bien, in which he starred with Yves Montand, and The Letter to Jane, which is like a 45-minute. I think he attacks a lot of people in that.
Yeah.
Primarily her. Still worth seeing, I believe, just to kind of see it in a see it to believe it mode.
Absolutely.
Now, I think we're going to hear some very diverse takes on Breathless based on what I've been hearing this week from both my partner and I when we watched it, and a few emails that we received during the week. So, in this Q&A, please remember to push that participant button and the box over on the right-hand side, and I guess the word is fire away.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Max. Again, please go ahead and hit the participant button and raise your hand. We have a couple of questions. We're going to have a relatively short period of questions today. So if you have a question we don't get to, please go ahead and put it in the chat, and we'll get back to it at a later date. So Daniel, if you would please start your video.
Yes.
Starting with the toughest one.
Yeah, well,
Hi, Daniel.
I'm going to be gentle. Even though this is not a favorite film of mine, I wanted to call everybody's attention to more features on the Criterion set. In particular, on the first disc that carries the feature itself, there are some extra interviews on that disc 1.
Mm-hmm.
And they are fascinating. There is a predictably very edgy interview with Godard. And then there are interviews with Belmondo, who goes into detail about how they created the script day by day and basically improvised all the dialogue and tried to learn that. But most interesting to me was the interview with Seberg, who was a complete American, born in Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
And in the film, Patricia, her character, is always struggling with French, which is, suitable for this character. But in real life, Seberg had virtually fluent French, barely accented. And it's there in that interview.
You've clarified something for us about this.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Because I saw that interview and I wasn't paying close attention to the fluency of her French, but thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, she's proficient. I wouldn't say fluent, but she can easily form almost any kind of thought in French. And it's just an interesting sense of what they did to create that character. So,
Daniel, did you want to throttle the interviewer of Seberg the way I did?
Yeah. She was just digging for dirt, clearly.
Digging for dirt, yeah.
And it just, Seberg did a good job of fending her off, I thought. But yeah, it was a frustrating experience. But also I would recommend in that same batch, the interview with Melville, who is very entertaining, as he always was in those instances. So,
And I think you had on that disc, if I remember correctly, Dan, you have the D.A. Pennebaker, the documentary filmmaker. He's interviewed, and you really get a sense of what it was like as a young man to see Breathless when it first came out, and how it, spun one's head around as an aspiring young filmmaker.
Yeah.
Daniel, thank you very much.
Okay, Happy
as
New Year,
usual.
gentlemen.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Howard, if you could please start your video.
Next
And
one.
unmute yourself.
Okay. All right. So I'm Howard's wife, Dahlia. And here is what I have to say. I did happen to see it when it just came out. I was very young and very impressed by it. But the interesting part is that the person that impressed me most was really Belmondo. I mean, she was like, for me at that time, an afterthought. But when I saw it just recently, a few days ago, I was so impressed by her. I was like drinking her up in every shot. She is just a breath of fresh air, you know? And so this is what I wanted to say. Now, my question is, were they taking a lot of takes? I mean, were they just film? I mean, because I read quite a number of reviews, and it did mention that he basically wrote the script at the day off or the day before. Did they take a lot of shots? Oh,
That's an excellent question. I don't know from what I understand, the shooting ratio was not massive on this film. So they didn't talk about how many times they had to take a scene. I would imagine there would have been some limits on that.
right.
What I thought was particularly interesting, and I agree with you about Seberg, I think she's mesmerizing in review. I felt the way you did in the past, but I really felt she was mesmerizing on this viewing. Just, you know, when the camera pans to her in the hotel room and she's wearing his fedora and smoking and things.
And the shirt, she's
And
wearing
the
the shirt. Any pose, any attire, she is just tops, you know.
You know, absolutely. And they had a fascinating disagreement. There's the scene towards the end when they're hiding out in the photographer's apartment, and she's walking around the room and the camera's following her. This is after she has revealed she's informed on him. She wanted to play it much more intensely. Godard wanted her to speak softly. She won during the filming, but when she saw the scene, she realized he was right. So she dubbed her voice in a much more relaxed way, even though her facial expression is more intense.
Right. Everything is like casual, frivolous, no big drama. You know, it's just like unbelievable. And you know, toward the end, I also want to say that when I saw it originally, he's going like this on his lips, was very impressive to me. This time, it was kind of obnoxious. I don't know. It's like
I felt the same way.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
More
Great
of an
question.
extreme gesture or something now.
Barry, would you please unmute yourself?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, another great talk. Thank you, Max. Thank you, Gary.
You're welcome, Barry.
Thank you.
A few quick questions. You spoke about the character inconsistency. It appears to me that Seberg was more inconsistent than he was. And was that just a matter of expediency, given that he was writing on the spot the night before or the day of, to make her character so much of a waffling type character? The next question, hold that for a second. I have two more quick ones. They may all tie together. There were so many jump cuts, and you spoke about the film needing to be shorter. I understood it had to be 90 minutes. I'm guessing it was the distributor that didn't want to distribute a long film. Is that the case? And why was it so much at the end? Was it just expediency?
In terms of the fast edits?
Yeah, the jump cuts.
Because it seemed to be a little bit more extreme towards the end. It could have been, but by that time, a stylistic thing. That I can only speculate. But in terms of the character, Gary, we'll have two different views. My meat and potatoes take is, I think the writing on the spot doesn't help if you're trying to get a more consistent character, because I was a little confused by her behavior at the end, turning him in because she loved him, or she knew, but she
Yeah.
I
What do
agree
you
with
think,
that.
Gary?
Yeah, that's
But
how
I
I
also
feel.
recommend, Barry, if you can, find that Criterion disc. The original editor, Cécile Desugui, I believe is the pronunciation. She really goes into detail about how the jump cutting evolved, and I think there were sort of multiple imperatives at work when the film was in post-production.
Thank you, Gary. I will. One last thing. The use of music, you haven't addressed at all. And there's such a heavy
Right,
dose
it's a beautiful
of jazz. It's not the first new wave or first film to use jazz, but it was extensive. Can you just touch a little bit about his love of jazz or his use of the jazz in the movie?
Was that Michel Legrand, Gary?
No, I think, I forget who, I'm actually not recalling who has the music credit in the film. There's sort of two or three different musical motifs. There's the piano, there's the da-da-da-da-da. And unlike
the xylophone type theme.
Right. Louis Malle a couple of years earlier used Miles Davis. He improvised a score to Elevator to the Gallows, his first feature film. I'm like, this is a case where I'm actually drawing a blank who did the
Uh-huh.
score. Later on, Godard used some more well-known composers, but not, I don't think in the case of this film.
Yeah, we can easily look that one up. But
Great.
but you do see a motif reoccurring. It's some effective use of music. Absolutely.
Thank you, Barry. We have time for 2 more questions. So Lori, if you would please start your video and unmute yourself. Lori, can you unmute yourself, please?
Martial Solal was the composer. Just wanted to point that out.
That's the subject for further research.
Yeah.
Okay,
Martial
Lori,
Solal.
one more time. Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, there we go.
Here you go.
I've been showing this movie to a film history class on the college level for the last 14 years, and I tell you that most of them do not get it at all.
Interesting.
They don't get references. They don't have historical references. But as far as shooting goes, like the scene in the bedroom, one of the extras on the Criterion is the DP, and he goes, I don't know what I would do with lights when they're shooting that scene in the bedroom. He's like, there was no room for lights, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it was like a blessing, you know, in his regard. And the AD is like, yeah, you know, it was just what we call guerrilla filmmaking, you know, no permits, no, you know, just running guns. So,
And it's a good thing that you mentioned that, because we haven't mentioned some of the funny ways they were shooting this film, and putting Kutar in a wheelchair for the tracking shots, and if there was a postal cart that was used for the Champs-Elysees scene, they put the camera
way post Steadicam. You know, it was like 20 years
exactly.
Steadicam. So it's very interesting when you show. It's a very polarizing film. You know, here's what I tell my students is that whether you loved it or hated it, you will never forget it, and that's what's important about it. So
I can't believe you're suggesting that Godard is polarizing. I'm being sarcastic. But that's a very good point.
but,
Thank you very much, Lori. That was great. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. And our last question, Lee, would you please start your video?
Hello.
First of all, I'd love to be in that class that she taught for 14 years, because I feel like I watch some of these movies, and I'm not young, but I have no idea what they're talking about. So I'd like to know where that class is, and can I take it? The other question, the other thing, just something that struck me in the beginning, when he's in the car, the first car he steals, and he's alone, and he's riding in the country, and he's talking to the camera.
Yeah.
He's not talking to me, right? Is that breaking the fourth wall?
Absolutely. That's a Brechtian device that Godard is going to use quite a number of times in films like Pierrot Le Fou and A Woman is a Woman, where people are saying comments right to the camera. It's like calling attention to the fact that we're watching a film, as Brecht was calling attention to that you're watching a play.
Yeah.
And other directors started copying that.
Sure, why not? It's a good fit.
Now, in fairness, Ernst Lubitsch was doing that in the early 30s, so Godard wasn't the first, but he did it very well.
Only to them, so I don't know.
Even James Bond did it once in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. This never happened to the other fella.
I don't remember that. That's funny.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you very much. And
Well, so
that's the last of our questions for tonight. Again, for those of you who still have your hands up, do apologize. If you put your question in the chat, we'll make sure it gets answered at a later time. Mac,
we're going to move into a series of special events here, but the first thing we're going to see is a little trailer that Max put together for a presentation he's doing, I believe, on Wednesday, January 6th, Max. Is that correct?
That is correct. So it's a week from today, right? It'll be New York on film. It's going to be a look at how the Big Apple has been portrayed in the movies going back to the silent years. And here, this will just give you a little taste of what the fun we'll be having next week.
This is one of your signature programs, I know.
One of my signatures, but we're going to have new material that only New Plaza audiences will be seeing.
All right.
We'll be making some changes. Let's take a look.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Max.
And before we go on, we will send everybody a link to the registration for that event, so not to worry.
On Sunday, January 10th, we're going to have, and as our next talk back, a New York City set film, and which is still being vigorously debated here by New Plaza Cinema. At least one of the likely titles you saw some clips of in this presentation by Max. So you can we'll keep you guessing for a couple more days. Now we want to let you hear a few words from a lady who's really been kind of the spiritual godfather here of New York, of New Plaza Cinema from the very beginning, and she still is, and will continue to be. And that's Toby Talbot. Her husband, Dan Talbot, of course, operated the Lincoln Plaza for almost 40 years. And his distribution company, New Yorker Films, was for many years the U.S. distributor of Godard's Breathless, as well as many other Godard films, both early and late. So, Toby, if you're there,
I'm
please
here. I don't
regale
see
us.
myself, but I'm here.
Yes, Toby, if you could start your video, you should have a question. You should be
Okay.
able to hit your screen now. There you go.
Aha.
And
Let me
adjust
adjust
your
it.
camera. Yes. Sit a little further back. We're just seeing.
I'm not catching myself.
Okay, if you could just toggle your camera just up slightly, or the back of your computer up slightly. The other way. A little bit more if you can. Excellent. Thank you, Toby.
Voila.
You may see me, but I don't see me.
Okay. We see you, Toby.
Okay. Well, it really is very breathtaking for me to see this this ongoing love of cinema. I think that one of the things that Dan accomplished was really to create a community of cinephiles. And he didn't do this in a pedantic way. He just showed films that he loved, that we loved. And sometimes he knew it was not going to be a very commercial film, but we had the freedom to do that. And one of the things that exhilarated us about Breathless when we first saw it, and how to recapture that feeling of first seeing something that just makes you sit at the edge of your chair. The first time we saw Breathless, we just both turned to each other with a wow. It was so jumpy. It was so, you didn't know what was going to happen next. It was what images can really do. In a second, they register on your brain, and before you know it, you're on to the next thing. It's like one dream quickly following another dream. And we had a very good and close relationship with Jean-Luc. When he came to New York, he'd come up to our office, which was originally on 61st Street, and he wasn't interested in talking about cinema. He just wanted to know, would Dan go to 47th Street and buy some equipment for him and use all his royalties to buy more equipment. He was a genuine aficionado and creator of aficionado stuff. And also, he was one of the earliest individuals I knew who got very excited about video because he saw it as a very political act of getting film, cinema, to a larger population. So there was no longer an elitist thing that, could know to watch Soviet cinema and so forth. So he is a very freewheeling spirit, and he imbued that spirit with us. And Dan and I adored him from the beginning, will adore him to the end. And adore means to worship, so it's not exactly that, but we appreciate the liveliness, the energy, the vibrancy, the what's next. I myself don't know what's next, but we're very happy. I'm very happy, and this is the 3rd anniversary of Dan's passing. It was in fact yesterday. So I was watching the memorial, Dan's memorial, and I was rereading the letters he wrote to me before we were married. So thank you.
That was beautiful, Toby. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Dan. Okay, we're going to ask Sean to come on. We're going to give Gary a couple of minutes break there. Sean, you're good.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Toby, you have me in a little bit of tears here. So that was very moving. Thank you so much. We definitely appreciate everything that you do to really help us with the mission of keeping art cinema alive all over the world, I guess now is really where we're focused. So we're going to do a couple of things, and I want to tell you a little bit about what we're going to do. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to have a bit of a quiz, some questions and answers that we're going to do a little bit of an interactive that really to reinforce the year that we've had with some of the films. And so Gary and Max are going to lead us through that. After that, we're going to try something completely new. We'll cross our fingers and hope it works okay. But we're going to go into breakout rooms. We're going to split us all up. We're going to go into breakout rooms. And what we really want to hear from you, if we can figure out how to do this right, is what you like about what we've been doing so far and what you'd like to see more of, or something different that you may like to see. So, and if you don't get a chance to express your opinion in the breakout rooms, please do leave it for us in the chat comments as well, because we're doing this to deliver it to you, the audience. So we want to make sure that you have that. So that's the second thing that we're going to do. And then the third thing is that we have the marvelous Leslie Harrison, jazz singer extraordinaire, who's joined us and is going to be sharing a performance with us. And then that is going to be followed by Norma, who's on now, giving us a toast into the new year. So I want to thank everyone for being with us this year. We really, really appreciate it. And now we're going to go to some questions. So Saul, you can take it back and we'll see how this works.
Great. Thanks, Sean. So like Sean said, keeping our fingers crossed. I'm going to ask in a moment for everybody's help here. We have 8 questions in our quiz, and you'll see all of the 8 questions on your screen. You may not see all of them at the same time. What you'll need to do is, if you have a mouse, go ahead and scroll. If you have an iPad, go ahead and use your finger to scroll. That should take you to them. Those of you on the phone, unfortunately, you'll just have to wait. So let me share the poll. Everybody should be able to see the questions. And you can start answering them. And again, just go ahead and scroll your mouse down the page, answer a question. When you get to the very bottom, hit the submit button. And we'll just take a minute or two and let the questions come in.
And again, if you hit your cursor on the poll, it will slide down to the next question so that you can see all of the questions as you go.
Great. Thanks, Sean.
Mm-hmm.
Good way of doing it as well. Okay, so do we have people answering the questions? Good, I see one question, one person. Go ahead and don't be shy. Actually, there are a lot of wrong answers, but just having a little fun here. Okay. Great, we're getting a number of answers right now. Appreciate it. We'll give it another minute and a half to answer all the questions. and then we'll share the answers with everybody. So it's good. We're all over the map there. You know, each question has answers that are not a clear winner, except for question 4. Everybody seems to know the answer to that one, or seems to. We'll see. Okay, we'll give everybody just one more moment on the clock. 8 questions. All right. And what I will do is I'm going to count to 10. Okay, your last second to put your answer in. Go ahead. Don't be shy. Let's get that last answer in. Good. We got 71, 72, 73 people. Oh, let's get 80. Let's get 80. Can we get 80? Okay, so we're just there. So thank you for everybody for participating. I'm going to end the polling right now, and I'm going to share the results. And again, like before, if you go ahead and use your mouse to scroll, or the scroll bar on the right-hand side, you'll see each question. And I'm going to ask Gary and Max to come in again for a moment, and they're just going to go over the answers real quickly. Gary, you joining us? Okay. So will you guys do the honors, read the question, and move on?
All right, Max, I'll let you take the first one because I know you want to plug a film that's referenced in this question.
I do I? Let's see, which of these directors did not direct a movie musical? Now, Minnelli, of course, did. Bogdanovich did. Stevens did. The answer is Francois Truffaut.
And Peter Bogdanovich directed a musical, which I know you're a fan of, that not everybody may have heard of, but is well worth watching, At Long Last Love, from the mid-'70s.
From the mid-'70s, which was very underrated. And of course, George Stevens directed Swing Time, which Gary and I discussed very early on in our Talkback series this year.
That was episode 1, actually.
Episode 1. And I'm glad you got the next question, Gary, because I'm a little not sure if I got this next one.
Well, which European film influenced Marty Scorsese in the making of Mean Streets? Well, I mean, in fairness, you could say that all 4 of those films influenced him, and he loves all 4 of them to one degree or another. However, the correct answer is I Vitelloni, because you have a similar story of, you know, shiftless young men in both I Vitelloni and Mean Streets, with guns in their hands in Mean Streets, and perhaps cannolis in I Vitelloni, trying to find their way in the world with varying degrees of success. Apologies for the misspelling of Le Samurai there to Mary Ann. That's Samouri.
Yeah. With an umlaut over the I. So yeah.
Yes.
So.
Max, you definitely have to take number 3 because this.
Yeah. Oh boy, a little rusty here. How many films did Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward make together? This is so embarrassing. I want to say 11, but I'm not sure if it's 14. I'm going to say 11, but if that includes stuff he directed her in.
Well, we're not, certainly when I put this question out there, we were not including the ones that I guess we should have say acted in together. And I think 10 is the correct answer there.
10, okay, that sounds correct. So okay. Next is yours.
Okay, which of these film directors is not French? Well, the answer there is actually Jean-Luc Godard, who is Swiss.
Although he described himself as Franco-Swiss. So it's a little bit of but he's generally, the Swiss claim him as one of theirs.
Yeah, I mean, certainly when he makes a film, it's always submitted as a Swiss film to to film festivals and to the Academy Awards when it's considered. So that may be a subject for slightly further research.
Very much so. And then number 5, which of these films directed by Martin Ritt was not nominated for an Academy Award?
And I have to apologize. There is a typo there on D, although people were not fooled by that, and they picked it the least. That should say Norma Ray, not network.
Oh, okay, because I was going to say, well, that's easy.
Yeah.
But okay, obviously in this case it would be network. If it was Norma Ray, then I would say the answer would be A, Paris Blues. Is that
Correct?
Okay.
All right, now you get the next one because we discussed this the other day too, I believe.
And I don't think I agree with this statement, but it says, who said cinema is truth 24 times a second? That was Godard, who was credited with saying that, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, although I think we concluded that he had said it through one of his characters in one of his early films, perhaps not necessarily out of his own mouth.
That I can't recall, but it's often attributed to Godard.
Yes, that's the right answer. Now, number 7. Here's one that I'll let you take because I think this is one we discussed also.
Which of these films is not adapted from a book? The Swimmer, Christmas Holiday, No Way Out, The Stuntman. Well, technically, I'm going to have to say The Swimmer because that was adapted from a short story.
Well, I think that again, we should have been a little more specific. I guess a book or story or literary source. Mm-hmm. And the correct answer actually is No Way Out, which is an original Oscar-nominated screenplay. The Stuntman is from a book which nobody seemed to be able to put their hands on when we talked about the film, but it was indeed a novel. Christmas Holiday, I actually did finish reading it. Not one of Mom's best, but definitely from a novel.
And then which famous American was instrumental in getting the Manchurian Candidate made? I would say John F. Kennedy because he was a big fan of the novel himself.
Yes, and
President Kennedy.
He actually, I think, importuned a United Artists, to not be concerned about the about the political implications of it. Ironically.
These are good, tough questions.
That was fun. So if people paid attention and came to our events, they would probably have known the answer there. So good, thank you. Including you, right? We got some of them wrong as well. And you've been to all of them, Max, all but one maybe. Okay, so thanks guys, appreciate it. Sean?
Right now, I want to introduce, first of all, thanks you guys for the breakout. I don't know how it went in the other rooms. We had a blast in the room that I was in. It's so much fun to see everyone and to be able to talk to everyone. We'll try to do that more as we go in the future. We'll try new things, new and different things, but it's such a blessing to be able to see everyone and talk to anyone, and we appreciate that. I'm going to introduce Leslie Harrison, and many of you came to our program on Paris Blues, which was, we had a great jazz theme. We learned how many jazz lovers we have out there. But one of our special guests was Wayne Winborn, who's the head of the Institute for Jazz Studies at Rutgers. Now, Marianne Tesler, one of our, on our leadership team, is actually who is bringing Leslie to us, who got Leslie to come to us, which is great. But I had a chat with Wayne and I said, Wayne, do you know Leslie? And he said, well, I don't know her well personally, but I know her work because I've been in New York for many years. And he said, Leslie is one of the best female jazz singers, one of the best jazz singers anywhere. And so he's like, how'd you guys get her? Because she's so good. So I don't want to spend a lot of time here, but I want to introduce you to Leslie, and we're going to have a little performance by Leslie, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Sean, and thank you so much to the family of the New Plaza Cinema for having me this evening, and a very special merci beaucoup for my dear friend Madame Marianne Tesler, for inviting me to be a part of this wonderful discussion on Breathless. And just so I can clarify this, because not only am I a vocalist, I'm also a radio announcer for the premier jazz station in the country, WBGO Jazz 88.3 FM, WBGO 88.3, and online with WBGO.org. But the soundtrack was done by French jazz pianist Marshall Solal, and for Breathless, and it features also a dear friend of mine who's no longer with us, tenor saxophonist Johnny Griffin, on that soundtrack. So that's my WBGO spiel. It's an honor and a pleasure to join you this evening. And as we wind down this incredible year we've had. So it's wonderful to have a year-end gig because, as you know, a lot of performers haven't been able to do anything. But it's a pleasure to join you tonight and bring you a little bit of jazz. That what you're going to hear is from my new recording. It's called Soul Book Volume 1, and there's a song on it that I do with my full band, an organ trio. I'm a big fan of the organ. But my longtime music director and wonderful guitarist, Saul Rubin, joins me on this wonderful duet for the song called I Wish I Knew. Have a listen. I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you so much. This song is called I Wish I Knew. It's on my new record called Soul Book Volume 1. We hope you enjoy it. I wish I knew someone like you could love me. I wish I knew you'd place no one above me. Did I mistake this for a real romance? I wish I knew only you can answer. If you don't care, why let me hope and pray so? Don't you lead me on. If I'm a fool, say so. Should I keep dreaming? Oh, forget you. What shall I do? I wish I knew. I wish I knew someone like you could love me. I wish I knew you'd place no one above me. Did I mistake this for a real romance? I wish I knew only you can answer. If you don't care, why let me hope and pray so? Don't you leave me on. If I'm a fool, say so. Should I keep dreaming? Oh, forget you. What shall I do? What shall I do? What shall I do? I wish I knew. Thank you very much. Thank you Saul Ruben. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all so very much. I say Happy New Year to you all, and I invite you to join me on my website, leslieharrison.net. May we have a wonderful 2021. Kapun Ka to our visitor from Bangkok or Thailand, where I normally am this time of year. Thank you. Merci beaucoup, Marianne. And thank you all so much.
Excellent. Thank you, Leslie. You can't see it or hear it, but everybody's raising their hands and clapping for you. So thank you so very much. That is
Yeah,
beautiful.
thank you. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So let me ask Norma to start her video. And unmute. Norma, can you unmute yourself as well?
Can you say so to everybody to start to have some wine or champagne for a talk?
Sure, I think that's a great idea. I've got my wine and champagne, and if everybody wants to, Norma, can you unmute yourself? There you go. You should be good to go. So I'm going to spotlight Norma for just a couple of moments, and then so everybody can see her really well. And Norma's going to start.
Okay, well, thank you, Leslie. That was just really a wonderful musical moment to end this year. And I really want to thank all of you who are here with us tonight. You have been wonderful for New Plaza. We're alive and well because of you. Your devotion and support is tremendously appreciated. And you make us all very happy. And we're glad that you're continuing to grow, and you seem to like us, which is more than we can ask. So as the year ends, we have reason to hope, I think, for a better future. We hopefully will have some good health news coming our way next year and some economic news. And for all of you out there, you should know that we are hopeful. We don't know, but we are hopeful that we will be able to get a big screen cinema of some sort operating next year. Remains to be seen, but we definitely want to do it, and we want to simultaneously continue with our virtual programs because they are doing very well and people seem to love them and we love doing them. So hopefully things will work out and we will have both cinema experiences next year. And with that in mind, I ask you to join us, all of us at New Plaza, as we raise our glass to the promise of 2021 and offer a toast to the new year. Hopefully a better year, hopefully a joyful year. We wish you and your family the best, and we want to thank you for being with us this year, and we want to wish you all a very, very happy and healthy new year. Thank you.
Bravo. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you for being with us.
Happy New Year.
Thank you for having me. Bonne année.
Leslie, you was wonderful as usual.
Yes.
Cheers, darling.
That was
Cheers.
terrific.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Let's catch our breath and have a good one in 2021.
Yeah. What are you drinking, Leslie?
I'm drinking vodka and sorrel.
Okay,
Sarah.
drinking champagne, obviously.
Yes, of course.
And you, Kathleen. Kathleen, you're drinking champagne too. Cheers.
Mm, this is beautiful.
What am
Thank
I
you so much.
drinking?
What are you drinking, Saul?
He's got a secret.
Yeah.
Looks like a milkshake.
And what about Gary?
They will be.
Gary, what are you drinking?
I'm afraid right now I'm just drinking some seltzer water, and I'm going to move on to something else a little later, I think.
Okay.
And Max?
Well, that's much heavier than me, Gary, because I'm just drinking water.
Regular water.
Force of habit as a speaker. That's all I drink when I
Yeah,
speak.
the two of you
Later.
are.
Tomorrow is where the interesting stuff happens.
You're all professionals.
Yeah, and I'm the jazz singer. Alcohol.
Oh, yeah.
I'm the jazz fan. Why?
Yeah, you. That's right, Sean. You know.
Okay.
Cheers.
Happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Take care.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.